You know, the thing that bothers me most in the entire world is the fact that we as a species are slowly poisoning our atmosphere with an array of greenhouse gases, thereby turning it slowly but steadily into an inescapable hothouse that will destroy us as a species and many other species also. Wait, no, actually, you know what? It's people who think they know what the author meant. You don't. End of story. Well, okay, maybe it's a little more complicated than that. So I tend to have, little respect for critics and scholars of the arts, mostly because, and this is definitely not true in the overwhelming majority of cases, but I just cannot shake the feeling that they are all failed artists who just weren't creative enough, but who wanted to be in that scene and who wanted to be respected in that scene because they're bitter. But that's just me being in that relationship from the perspective of the artist. I don't really mind media critics, really, when it comes down to it, and I'm not being hyperbolic. I do actually like some of them a lot. I mean, a significant part of my YouTube diet consists of channels like Lindsay Ellis and Cosmonaut Variety Hour. I do find that the more academic they get, the more focused on their particular axiomal constructs they become, often to the detriment of the work being analyzed. Some do have a tendency to contextualize works of art or entertainment media, or whatever you want to call it, into frameworks that they were not designed in, and then pretending like the artist cared or even knew about the various lenses and theories that scholars find interesting. And I do think that it's completely fine if you go, hey, I'm gonna analyze this film out of this particular lens, working off this particular theory. I'm gonna do it through a feminist lens or a Christian lens. I don't think that's a thing that is problematic at all. I do think that it's important that you understand and you tell your audience that this is your particular analysis of this thing through this particular lens. It is not the absolute truth and end-all be-all of the whole situation. You're not even necessarily trying to ascertain the absolute truth, and you certainly cannot make definitive statements about what the author thought, what they did, and what they were trying to do. So for instance, there's a lot of stories with a lot of politics in them, and a lot of characters with a lot of different opinions on those kind of politics, often just hypothetical societies. Heinlein was fond of doing this. He created hypothetical societies that were culturally, structurally, politically very different from our own. Or rather, the one that he was inhabiting at the time, because there have been some changes since. He's been dead for a while. And then you have people who watched the film Starship Troopers and go, oh, Robert A. Heinlein, who wrote the book that has pretty much nothing to do with the film, he's a freedom-hating fascist who wants to bring back the Nazis, lol. The thing is, you can actually know about a lot of Heinlein's political beliefs because he was pretty vocal about a lot of them. But taking a work of fiction that he created and then interpreting it in a way that suits your predetermined view of the guy, that's not just wrong, that's stupid. I mean, you wouldn't say that, Bret Easton Ellis is a serial killer just because the main character of his landmark novel is one. That's just absurd. It's just an exploration of the life and mind of a serial killer. Sometimes you can read books of fiction and make statements about the worldview of the authors, such as with George Orwell or Ayn Rand. But this is because these authors will straight up tell you that they wrote these books to get a certain message out, and this is the worldview that they believe in. Orwell was afraid of totalitarianism and mass surveillance. Rand was an avowed anarcho-capitalist. Very often, artists will just do a thing without even considering the ramifications that this would have in the analysis of academics, because that's not their job to do. They do not need to subject themselves to, oh, well, if I write this, then the academics will flip their shit because they're going to look up on the table and this red carpet, located in this particular janitorial building, described with these certain terms, means that I am advocating that we rebel against the bourgeoisie next Thanksgiving. And then it's going to be, oh, how dare he say this thing in his work that he never actually said. Oh, but Burger, why are you even talking about this? That's not how rational people do literary analysis. Congratulations, you are not part of the problem. Doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. Last year, I published a quartet of short stories on my short stories channel called A Day in the Life of Hugo Hendricks. So the premise is there's this guy called Hugo Hendricks, and we see the same day in 4 parallel universes, all in like different futures of our world, where there are very different political systems. Most people, you know, they got it. They just enjoyed the stories, enjoyed seeing these, like the same cast of characters placed in like various, very different political contexts. And then there was a couple where they went, oh, well, I like 3 of the stories of ideologies that I don't like, but the one that seems to be criticizing my pet ideology, that one is very bad. You shouldn't have written that one. But my favorite ones, and these are rare, I think it was maybe like 2 of them that DM'd me on Twitter or Discord or some shit, that went like, oh, well, you're just a theocratic imperialist fascist for writing The Honored One. Or, oh, you're just a beta male soy cuck for writing The White Knight. I mean, at that point, you're a grown adult who is just incapable mentally of separating the creator of a work from the work itself, which is something that a child should be able to do, and especially in the very loud public discourse, you know, the Twitter wars. A lot of people do not seem to possess these intellectual capacities. I have characters in unpublished works that are just straight up unapologetic racists who believe in the genetic superiority of the white race. They're not necessarily the villains of the work either. I'm not going to strawman these ideologies, I'm going to present them in their strongest possible light, because the characters who believe in them with the strongest possible arguments that exist for them, even if I find the ideologies completely repulsive. Soon as those stories come out, I will have a few people who will be calling me a Nazi, even though most people might even find the exploration of those ideas to be interesting. There just seems to be a certain subset of the population who doesn't understand what artists are actually supposed to do in society, and who really just want to have the work they don't like reflect on the person that created it, without even knowing who that person actually is. There is this notion, and it is especially common among media critics, that artists need to be aware of the context and the ideas that are conveyed in their work so they don't propagate harmful ideas. Essentially, what that boils down to is that every artist should just be their own censor and propagandist. At the end of the day, that is not just an insult to people who consume media, basically saying that they are incapable of forming their own opinions on things and will just blindly accept anything any random person tells them, but it also flies in the face directly. It's a complete contradiction to what free artistic expression is actually about. So do go ahead and apply all kinds of lenses to all kinds of works for all kinds of analyses, but don't pretend that you can actually definitively know what the author was trying to do with the thing, if they were trying to do anything at all. Even if they straight up tell you, which is a good indicator that the thing they were trying to do is the thing that you thought they were trying to do, that might still be them being sort of in character as an artist. You cannot definitively know for sure. And that's okay, because that is how you keep art separate from propaganda. Thank you very much for watching yet another pseudo-intellectual ramble that I have rambled. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. Share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, or maybe buying some of my beautiful merchandise or the short story collection that I have written, which there's a lot of very different political ideologies in here and different ways of thinking. There's characters with opinions that I find, like, personally quite disgusting. But they are still characters that have those opinions. They are still valid people that can exist. And in that spirit, maybe have a little bit of empathy and maybe consider that you do not, in fact, know everything. And see you around, cunts.